My name is Ellie, and I'm 32 years old. If someone asked me whether I ever had big dreams in life, the answer would be yes. I used to want to be a writer, someone who could write stories that changed the way people saw the world. But reality quickly woke me up. Have you ever felt like the invisible one in your own life? Let me know your story down in the comments. I met Ethan Pierce at a college alumni event. He was 33 now, a charismatic partner at a venture capital firm. But back then, he was just an ambitious analyst with a worn-out blazer and a 5-year plan. I was a grant writer for a nonprofit. I loved my job. It didn't pay much, but it felt like I was writing things that mattered. When Ethan's first startup idea got traction, we were living in a small apartment in Denver, splitting utilities. He needed capital, not just money, but time. He asked me to be his silent partner, to hold down the fort for just a couple of years while he built our future. So I quit my job. I left the nonprofit world and took a soulless administrative position at a law firm. It paid the bills. It covered our rent, our groceries, and the endless subscriptions for market data that Ethan swore he needed. It was a temporary sacrifice, he said. He was right. It was a sacrifice. But it wasn't temporary. As Ethan's career took off, Ethan the partner was slowly replaced by Ethan the VC. The man who used to hold my hand and listen to my stories about work now just assessed. He'd come home, loosen his tie, and ask, "What's the optimization for dinner?" He didn't ask what was for dinner. He asked how it could be optimized. Our relationship stopped being a partnership and became a holding pattern. And I stayed. I stayed when he missed my 30th birthday for an emergency meeting in Singapore. I stayed when he bought this cold, glass-walled house without asking me, telling me it was a sound investment for our portfolio. It's easy to ask why. Why would anyone stay in a room that's slowly getting colder? It wasn't love. Not anymore. It was the sunk cost fallacy. I looked at my life and I didn't see a husband. I saw an investment. I had poured my entire 20s, my career, my own dreams, into Ethan. I had funded his emotional and financial development. I was the angel investor who gave him everything when he had nothing. Walking away, that wouldn't just be ending a marriage. It would be walking away from my entire investment. It would be admitting that the shares I held all that time, all that sacrifice, were worthless. I couldn't do it. I couldn't let my investment fail. So I doubled down, trying to make the numbers make sense again, convincing myself that a market correction was coming. I just didn't realize I'd be the one to force it. The Aspen opportunity came up on a Tuesday night. Ethan was standing in the kitchen, scrolling through his phone. While I was cleaning up, the clinking of plates was the only sound. "Babe, the Aspen Investor Retreat is locked in for next weekend," he said. Not looking up, my hands paused over the sink. Aspen. I hadn't been on a real vacation in... I couldn't even remember. "Oh, that sounds nice," I said, trying to keep my voice light. "A little mountain air. I think we could both use that." That's when Cynthia, Ethan's mother, glided into the room. She was an art gallerist who had retired but never stopped managing. She was wearing a silk robe and looked, as always, like she was about to close a 7-figure deal. "Ellie. Darling." She used darling like a weapon. A little punctuation mark to remind you of your place. This isn't a break. This is the most critical investor weekend of the quarter. It's not a vacation. It's a performance. I turned to look at her. Oh, I can perform. Cynthia gave a small, tight laugh. It was a sound like ice cubes dropping into a glass. Image is everything. Ellie, you understand? The spouses who attend these events, they're part of the portfolio. They run foundations. They sit on gallery boards. They speak two languages. It's a certain presentation. She didn't have to say it. I heard the unspoken part loud and clear. You are not part of the portfolio. IDE. The former grant writer, the admin assistant who paid his bills for 5 years, was a liability to his image. I was the line item that didn't balance. I looked at Ethan, waiting for him to defend me, to say, Ellie's coming. She's my wife. He just winced, then put his phone down and tried to look sympathetic. And babe, we really need you here. It's actually perfect. You can stay and look after Zoe. Mom and I were so worried about leaving her with a new nurse for a whole weekend. Zoe, his half-sister, 29 years old. The story was that after a severe fever as a child, she had been left paralyzed. Mute. She lived with them, a silent figure in a wheelchair, always present in the corner of the room, her needs managed by a rotating staff of nurses, and me. Cynthia placed a cold hand on my arm. It's a huge relief. Ellie, knowing you'll be here, handling things you're just so good at. Well, handling things, not attending, not participating, handling. I just nodded. I perfected that nod. The nod that said, of course. The nod that said, I am no trouble at all. I turned back to the sink, and as I scrubbed a plate, I saw my reflection in the dark window over the sink. I looked invisible. I had been demoted. I wasn't his wife. I wasn't even his partner. I was the help, the unpaid, live-in caregiver for his paralyzed sister. The humiliation was complete. The departure was scheduled for Friday morning. Ethan came downstairs in a crisp travel polo, already looking like he belonged in Aspen. He didn't kiss me. He just handed me a folded piece of paper. This is Zoe's medication schedule, he said. His voice, all business. Her nurse comes at 9 a.m. and 5 p.m., but you'll need to handle her lunch. And don't forget, her physical therapy stretches. I know the routine. Ethan. Cynthia glided down the stairs, her luggage already taken to the car by a driver. She gave the living room a critical sweep. Ellie, do be a dear and make sure the microwave is wiped down before we return. I saw a smudge yesterday. It's just better when things are clean. Of course. Cynthia. I stood at the doorway as they loaded into the black SUV. Ethan finally looked at me. A flicker of something. Guilt. Maybe? We'll call when we land. He said, have a successful trip. He nodded, relieved that I wasn't making a scene, and got in the car. I watched them drive away, down the long, heated driveway of the cold, glass-walled house. And then, I was alone. The silence of that house was deafening. It was a rich person's silence, a thick and sterile. I walked through the rooms, my footsteps echoing on the polished concrete floors. I was a ghost in my own home. I was the curator of a museum I wasn't allowed to be a part of. I went to Zoe's room. She was just as they'd left her, sitting in her high-tech wheelchair, staring out the window at the mountains. She was the only other prisoner in this place. Well, Zoe, Isayad. Walking over to her, it's just us girls this weekend. She didn't turn. She just continued to stare. I spent the afternoon cleaning. I wiped down the spotless microwave. I rearranged the already perfect throw pillows. I was handling things. Around 4 p.m., I made us tea. I put 2 mugs on a tray, her usual chamomile. My black. I carried it to her room. The sun was starting to dip, casting long, cold shadows across the floor. She was still by the window. I set the tray down on her table. I don't know how much longer I can do this. Zoe, I whispered, more to myself than to her. I'm so tired. I feel like I'm disappearing. Maybe I'm just not strong enough for this. I waited for the usual silence, the silence that always confirmed I was alone. Instead, a voice, clear and steady, cut through the room. They treat you worse than they treat me. I froze. The blood drained from my face. I turned, but Zoe was still facing the window. It must have been my imagination. The stress. Ellie. I spun around. My hand hit the tray, and my teacup toppled over, shattering on the hardwood floor. Zoe was standing. She wasn't just standing, she had turned, taken a step away from the wheelchair, and was looking directly at me. Her eyes weren't vacant or passive. They were sharp, intelligent, and filled with an emotion I'd never seen before. You can talk, I stammered, backing away. You can walk. I've been able to walk for 3 years, Zoe said, her voice a little rough from disuse, but perfectly stable, and I've been able to talk for my entire life. My mind couldn't catch up. The nurses, the doctors, Cynthia's constant worry. But why? Why would you? Zoe took another step, walking past the shattered teacup. Why? Because when you are powerless, Ellie, your only power is observation. She sat on the edge of her perfectly made bed, not like a patient, but like a queen holding court. When you are the broken one, the mute one in the corner, you cease to be a person. You're not a threat. You're not a competitor. You become part of the furniture. And people say everything in front of the furniture. I sank into the chair opposite her, my mind reeling. How long? I started the mutism part-time when I was 15. Right after my father died and Cynthia got control of the estate. It was just easier, a way to opt out of her criticism, but I committed full-time after the fever. That's when I realized the true value of being invisible. The paralysis, that was new. I added that 3 years ago when Ethan brought you home. You did that because of me. No, she said, her voice softening. I did it because of them. I saw how Cynthia looked at you, the same way she looked at my mother, like something to be managed, optimized, and eventually discarded. I knew if I was just the mute girl, they'd expect me to do things, help, participate. But the paralyzed girl, she's a burden. And a burden's only job is to be quiet and watch. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto mine. And I have watched, Ellie, I've watched Ethan read your grant proposals and then pass off your ideas as his own in investor meetings. I've listened to him and Cynthia laugh about how manageable you are, how you're so desperate for a family you'll never complain. I've seen everything. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. And I know why they really went to Aspen. They aren't just dismissing you. Ellie, they're planning to replace you. Replace me. My voice was barely a whisper. The anger I should have felt was frozen, replaced by a cold, clinical shock. Zoe stood up and walked to her bookshelf. It was filled with texts on psychology, philosophy, and art history. She pushed aside a row of books to reveal a small, hidden safe. She entered a code, and it clicked open. Inside wasn't jewelry or money. It was a tablet, a burner phone, and a stack of notebooks. This wasn't a sick room, it was a war room. She handed me the tablet. This is my real ledger, she said. The screen lit up with a photo gallery. The first picture was of Ethan, My husband. He was at a bar I didn't recognize. Smiling. His arm was around a young woman. Brooke, 28 years old. A junior associate at his firm. In the next photo, he was kissing her. My breath hitched, but I didn't make a sound. I just kept scrolling. Her name is Brooke, Zoe said. Our voice flat. Analytical. She's been with him for 8 months. That emergency meeting in Singapore, that was their first trip. The Aspen Investor Weekend isn't for investors. It's for her. I looked up from the screen, my vision blurring. How did you... Like I said, I'm furniture. Ethan takes his private calls in the living room, right in front of me. He'd tell Cynthia that Brooke was a real asset to the firm. Cynthia met her for lunch last month. She approves. She called her a much better fit for the brand. I leaned back, the tablet heavy in my lap. The betrayal was so complete, so systematic. It wasn't a passionate mistake. It was a merger. I don't understand, I said, my voice hollow. Why would Cynthia help him? Zhu sat down, her gaze sharp. Because you're not looking at a family, Ellie. You're looking at a narcissistic family system, and you broke the rules. I just stared at her, confused. It all starts with Cynthia. Zoe explained, her voice like a professor's. She's the narcissist at the center. Everything revolves around her. In her world, there are only 2 roles, extensions of her, or threats to her. Ethan is the golden child. He can do no wrong because he's a reflection of her perfection. He's not a person, he's her prize. Her success story, whatever he wants. He gets because his success feeds her ego. She pointed a finger at her own chest. And then, there's the scapegoat. That was me. The one who gets blamed for everything. The one who carries all the family's dysfunction. I was the difficult one. The disappointment. The problem that allowed Cynthia to look like a martyr. My illnesses was the best thing that ever happened to her. It gave her a new role, the long-suffering, saintly mother. But then, Zoe said, leaning in, you came along, and you were perfect. You were quiet. You were supportive. You sacrificed everything. You made the golden child shine. You were the perfect utility until when I asked, until you started to look tired. Until you started to have needs. A utility isn't supposed to have needs. Ellie, the moment you became a person instead of an appliance, you broke the system. You weren't a good investment anymore. So, Cynthia and Ethan agreed. It was time for an upgrade. Brooke, I said. The name tasted like ash. Brooke. Zoe confirmed. She's shiny. She's new. She's ambitious. She's not looking for a partner, she's looking for a promotion. She's the perfect new asset. She took the tablet back from me. This weekend. This was their test run. To see if they could get away with it. To see if you'd just sit here, wipe down the microwave, and handle things while he started his new life. She opened a new file on the tablet, revealing 2 airline confirmations. For tomorrow, to Aspen. But they made one mistake. Zoe said, a cold. Bright smile spreading across her face for the first time. What's that? They left the scapegoat and the scrapped appliance in the same room. And we, she said, tapping the screen, are going to burn the whole system to the ground. The flight to Aspen was silent. The icy Rockies, a mirror of the coldness I'd lived in. Zoe had arranged everything: a rental car, a room at the same exclusive lodge. We checked in separately. I felt a strange, cold calm. The Ellie who worried about Cynthia's smudges was gone. I walked to the concierge. "I'm looking for the Pierce Venture Capital Summit," I said, forcing a bright, wifely smile. He frowned. "Ma'am, we have no corporate events or summits scheduled for this weekend. At all." He brightened. "Ah, yes. Mr. Pierce. He's in the Grandview Suite. A private leisure booking. A romantic getaway." His notes said. I thanked him, my blood running cold. The secondary twist hit me harder than the affair. He hadn't just brought his mistress on a business trip. He faked the entire investor weekend, lying to his own mother, all to get a free vacation with his assistant. He wasn't a ruthless executive. He was a pathetic, small-time fraud. We found them at the lodge's restaurant, sharing wine by the fire. "Showtime," Zoe whispered. We walked over. Ethan's smile froze when he saw me, but it shattered when he saw Zoe. Walking. Ellie. Zoe, what? How? You're walking. I've been walking for years. Ethan, Zoe said, air voice clear. She pulled out her tablet. "What are you doing?" he hissed. As other diners started to look, "Just saying hello," she said, tapping the screen. "We're live." Ethan, streaming to the Pierce family and friends Facebook group. "Say hi to your mom." Ethan's face went purple. "Turn that off." "Oh. But the main event hasn't started," I said calmly. I looked at Brooke. "Cynthia called you a much better fit for the brand. An upgrade." "This," Zoe said, and tapped her tablet again. A crystal clear audio file played. First, Cynthia's voice. "She's a liability. Find an upgrade." Then, Ethan's "I'm already vetting Brooke. She's perfect." Brooke's hand flew to her mouth. Ethan's phone, on the table, began to explode with notifications from the live stream. "How's that critical investor weekend going?" I asked. Leaning in, I asked the front desk. "There are no investors, no summit. You faked an entire corporate event, lying to your company, just to get a free vacation with your assistant?" Brooke burst into tears. Ethan sat frozen, publicly humiliated. "Goodbye, Ethan." We turned and walked out. We stayed in Aspen. My first call wasn't to a lawyer. It was to Ethan's HR department, informing them of his fraud. My second was to a divorce lawyer. The fallout was immediate. Ethan was fired for cause. I won the suit, taking my share of the assets and filing a $50,000 claim against Brooke. It wasn't messy. It was a transaction. 6 months later, I'm in my new apartment, running my own consultancy. Zoe is in Asheville, studying design. We are free. The doorbell rings. It's Ethan and Cynthia, deflated and gaunt. "Ellie?" Ethan begs. "I lost my job. No one will touch me. We lost everything. Please. We're family. You have to help us." I looked at them, the narcissist and the golden child, stripped of their power. "I'm not heartless. Ethan," I said softly, "I've just learned how to set boundaries." I gently closed the door. I walked back to my desk, and for the first time in a decade, my heart was completely at peace. Never let anyone turn your sacrifice into your silence. If you're ready to write your own story, share this one.